Hey guys, what's up? It's Charlie here, and today we're going to be looking at 10 things young people will never understand. So if you think about the world 10 or 20 years ago, it's changed a whole lot. Many 80s, 90s and early 2000s kids have a lot of memories about the old times. You may assume that every kid will have these memories, but many people don't understand how old they really are, and kids today will never understand what we experienced as kids. From VCRs to amazing 90s TV shows, here are things kids today just don't get. Before we get into it, why not subscribe and press the notification bell too. Coming in at number 10 is passing notes. So if you want to talk to your friend in class nowadays, how do you communicate? Chances are you use a phone. It's super easy to send a Snapchat to your friend and you don't even have to move or look in their direction. But back when we were kids, this was not the case. Most people didn't have phones, let alone Snapchat. Instead, people passed notes and discreetly passed them across the class. It would be like a covert operation, and sometimes the note would go around the entire class before getting to you. This of course meant the whole class could peek at what you were writing, so you couldn't write anything too secretive. But if you did write a secret on a note, the worst thing is a teacher seeing it. They may stop the entire class and read it out for everyone to hear. Before texting, your locker or desk cupboard probably looked like this. It would be packed with notes written in gel pens. It's kind of sad that kids today don't have this. While texting or using social media is definitely more easy, it's more fun to receive a note. It definitely had a more personal and secretive touch to it. Nowadays, if somebody sends you a Snapchat, they likely sent it to 7 other people. I wonder what's caused more high school drama, Snapchat or passing notes? Leave a comment letting me know what it's like at your school. Next up is 90s shows. So nowadays kids don't even watch TV. The internet really has made television obsolete. But back in the 90s and early 2000s, kids loved TV. You probably remember running home from school and turning on the TV. But what was on, you may be asking? Well, the 90s had some of the best TV shows of all time. Most kids loved things like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and Saved by the Bell, even if Zach Morris really was an evil genius. And early 2000s kids also had some amazing shows. Things like Keenan and Kel and all that were amazing, and still are. Other live action shows like Zack and Cody and iCarly were also pretty good. But who can forget the amazing 90s cartoons? There was Johnny Bravo, Ed, Edd and Eddy, and the Flintstones. Not to mention things like Scooby-Doo, Rocko's Modern Life, and Dexter's Lab. And of course we had very relatable cartoons like Fat Albert and Recess. Did anyone else really not like this guy? But really, I think the 90s was the prime time for kids TV. And of course back then the shows were filled with mysteries. For example, character faces that were never revealed, but we'll get into that in a moment. Next up is Bluetooth songs. If you want to listen to music today, how do you do it? You likely use YouTube or Spotify. Or if you happen to be related to Jay-Z, he probably forces you to use Tidal. But the point is, we don't buy songs anymore. Well, back in the day, neither did kids. However, it wasn't as simple as pressing a button to quickly download a song. Back in the day, it used to be very annoying to download songs. Usually, one of your friends would buy the master file. Then there would be the painful process of transferring the song to everyone's cell phones via Bluetooth. If you ever did this, you'll know it took absolutely ages to do. If you had bad speeds, it could take around half an hour to transfer one song. Just imagine doing that to a whole album nowadays. But if you guys were kids even before Bluetooth phones, then you may have used LimeWire. LimeWire was a way to download songs via the internet. However, you couldn't preview these downloads. Oftentimes, you'd spend ages downloading a song only to find out it was a cover or a Kidz Bop version. Hey, at least you didn't have to pay big money for music. But even so, do you remember Bluetoothing songs? If you do, then don't comment. You never know, the police could be watching. Just imagine getting thrown in jail for LimeWiring a Linkin Park song back in 2001. Next up is SLINKY. Nowadays, kids don't really have toys. Most young kids simply play on iPads. On iPads, you have 100 games, movies, songs, and YouTube videos. But back in the day, things were much more simple. Instead, you likely played with a toy such as a SLINKY. If you guys are too young to know what this is, a SLINKY is a very basic toy. It's basically one long, tangly piece of wire. They used to come in a silvery color, or if you were lucky, a rainbow color. They're not exactly amazing, but they do make you smile and you love pushing them down stairs. You'd be able to push a SLINKY down the stairs and it would seem like it was walking down them. However, the number one problem for kids back in the 90s with SLINKYs was getting them tangled. Everyone remembers getting their SLINKYs tangled, and when they get tangled, there's pretty much no going back. If you think getting your headphones tangled up today is annoying, then try getting a SLINKY tangled up. Did you guys used to play with a SLINKY? If so, do you still have your SLINKY or not? Next up is not knowing. So this one is kind of strange and is something you likely haven't thought about before. Back when you were younger, do you remember debating your friends? You may have been arguing over who won the Super Bowl back in 1991. and you may have even bet money on it, saying when we find out, then you owe me the money. But today this simply isn't the case. Instead of not knowing something and debating it, people simply Google it. At least this means you'll lose a lot less money making dumb, stubborn bets. But do you think it's kind of sad that we no longer don't know things anymore? Some say that having access to every piece of information makes us less curious. But do you think it's good or bad? To be honest, I'd much rather live in a world with Google. Just think about how much easier homework is now that we have Google. I think it's worth not having dumb bets anymore if we have Google. And of course, without Google, you couldn't even watch this video. Next up is Polaroids. How many photos do you take every day? Did you know that the average teen takes over 100 photos per week? And I'd bet that most of them are just selfies. But you may wonder, why do kids take so many photos nowadays compared to back then? Well, it's not because kids are more vain. Instead, it's all about money. Back in the day, it actually used to cost money every time you take a photo. Of course, now iPhones have pretty much unlimited photo storage. But back when kids would use film and Polaroid cameras, it would cost money to take a photo. You'd have to buy film for each image, and film was expensive. But I have to say, while iPhones are convenient, there's nothing more fun than Polaroids. Of course, with an iPhone, you get the photo instantly, but you don't get a printout, and there's nothing more satisfying than a printout. With a Polaroid, you'd also take and shake. This means you take the photo, it would come out, and then you'd have to shake it in the air to make the photo appear. This was a fun process and would give you a bit of a workout too. Nowadays, only hipsters really use Polaroids. You don't exactly see people in the street using Polaroid cameras, and rightly so. iPhones are way more convenient. But what do you guys prefer, Polaroids or digital photos? I think digital's much more convenient, but Polaroid is just so much more fun. Next up is CDs. What does your music collection look like now? Chances are it's simply a list of songs on your computer or phone, but back in the day it likely used to be a large zip-up case. That's right, people used to use CD cases and they would carry these massive things all over the place. DJ Khaled even once said that back in the 90s he would carry 20 boxes of CD cases around with him all the time. The reason why was because it wasn't possible to keep music in your pocket. Any music junkies would have one of these big bags full of CDs in their car. Now you may think this looks pretty cool, but it was very annoying. If you want to find a song, you likely just search it up. But back in the day you would have to flip through hundreds of cases of CDs. This is why many music maniacs would organize their CDs meticulously. People would organize them in alphabetical order. And every time you added a CD to your collection, you'd have to move every CD up one. This must have been a very annoying thing, and I can't imagine how many hours people must have spent organizing their CDs. All the people think that young people waste a lot of time on Facebook today, but just imagine how much time this would have taken up. But the worst thing about CDs would be if you got a scratch on them. Nowadays, music files can't be damaged, and if it gets corrupted, you simply download it again. But back in the day, you'd have to buy an entire new CD or burn it from a friend's. Next up is Tom and Jerry. So we've already talked about amazing 90s shows. We all know that nowadays you can look everything up about your shows, and there are many fan fictions and theories online about every single show. But back in the day we didn't have this, and there were simply mysteries to shows. And one of the biggest mysteries is, who is that woman in Tom and Jerry? Is she their owner or just a random lady? Well, it turns out she's actually a maid, and nowadays she doesn't talk in the way she used to, as people see it as rude now. However, we never once got to see her face. Or did we? In one episode her face was actually shown, except it was only for 1 second, so no kid would have seen it. Back then we couldn't pause TV, but of course now we can, so we can now look at her face. As you can see, this is what the woman from Tom and Jerry looked like. She doesn't look particularly remarkable, but it's interesting as we never got to see her once before. Her name is Mammy Two Shoes, and her face has only ever been revealed once. Did you guys know about Mammy Two Shoes or not? Next up is video rental stores. If you want to watch a movie nowadays, how do you do it? Chances are you start up Netflix. You can literally get any movie you want for $5 a month. Now that is a pretty good deal, but nowadays we binge watch. But back in the day it used to be a weekend treat to go to the video rental store and rent a video. There used to be a huge amount of excitement to it and it used to be very fun. But nowadays we all know that blockbusters are no more. Of course, the bad thing about Blockbuster is if you return the movie late, then you'd have to pay a fee. This led to many people simply keeping their Blockbuster DVDs. But did you know that back in the early 2000s when nobody knew what Netflix was, they offered Blockbuster to buy it for $50 million. Blockbuster actually laughed the CEO of Netflix out of the building. He thought that nobody would ever want to use Netflix. But now Blockbuster is out of business. Netflix, on the other hand, is worth $150 billion and it's the most valuable media company in the world. Yeah, that's gotta hurt. Whoever passed up on that offer should be fired. Next up is glowing stars. So this is a very simple pleasure that every 90s kid had. Whether you guys were scared of the dark or just like space, everyone had these glowing stars. If you don't remember, they were called Great Exploration stars. They were sticky glow-in-the-dark stars that you'd put all over your room. Most 90s kids had these all over their ceilings and walls. And I have to say, they do look pretty amazing at night. Do you guys have these? And if so, how messed up were your walls after you got older and took them off? These things would always rip off all of your wallpaper. But even so, it was definitely worth it, as Great Exploration stars looked awesome. Next up is mixtapes. So nowadays we still do have mixtapes. However, now a mixtape is something a rapper would release on SoundCloud, or perhaps give you on the street on Hollywood Boulevard. However, back in the day, people would make mixtapes for each other. Nowadays we simply send each other Spotify playlists, and that is definitely more convenient and cheaper. But back in the day, it would be a very romantic thing to give your lover a mixtape. They'd have to play it in their car tape players, and then you'd often call them, quizzing them on which songs were their favorite. If you guys remember doing this, then congrats, you lived a 90s movie. But seriously, this is actually something people used to do. I have to say it sounds kinda nice, but let me know if you guys ever did this or if it's before your time. Next up is telephone coils. Nowadays, the only wires coming from your telephone is when you charge it, and pretty soon we won't even have that. But back in the day before cell phones, you'd have to use a telephone. Today, landline phones don't have wires, but back in the day, they used to have massive coils. Now, while these were fun to fiddle with during a boring phone call, they were also very annoying. The only thing worse than a slinky getting all curled up was a telephone coil. It could get very annoying and incredibly messy around an office. And if so, do you prefer these old telephones or iPhones today? I have to say, I think the iPhone is only around a million times better. I have to say though, I much prefer telephone coils to Apple iPhone chargers. At least telephone coils didn't snap. Coming up next is VCRs. Did you guys ever use a VCR? Nowadays you likely have TiVo, or maybe you don't even watch TV and you watch everything on demand on Netflix. But if you did used to have a VCR, then you'll know the frustration of this. Every now and then, tapes would get totally scrambled and would be ruined. Another annoying thing about VCRs would be getting strips all over them. Sometimes tapes would glitch out and you'd get colored strips all over your video. This would totally destroy the movie experience and annoy you a lot. But the worst thing was when you accidentally recorded over a home video or your favorite show. This would mean that footage was lost forever, which is actually apparently what happened to the original moon landing tapes. That's right, somebody at NASA apparently recorded over them. But the worst thing about tapes was when somebody didn't rewind them. After watching a movie, you'd have to rewind the entire tape. But sometimes at a video rental store, people didn't rewind the tapes. Blockbuster even had to put stickers saying "Be kind, rewind" on the tapes. But even then, some terrible people didn't. If that was you, then shame on you. Check out the poll in the top right corner to vote for the thing you remember. Or if you don't remember anything, then leave me a comment letting me know. If you want more amazing videos, then check out my second channel. There'll be a link to that on screen in a moment. But as always, thanks for watching. Check out some more videos on screen right now, leave a like if you enjoyed, and if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Top 10s.